Hello. So, many apologies for the slight pause in the series of videos about the resurrection accounts in the Gospels. I meant to do one last week and we've skipped a week. So this is a fortnight since we thought about Matthew. So far we have considered the central story of women visiting a tomb and finding it empty. Also Mark's sudden ending and Matthew's transition to an appearance with the friends in Galilee. Often in thinking about themes in the Gospel stories, we tend to look at Mark, Matthew and Luke together and then turn to John, for the counterpoint narrative of Jesus. But on this occasion I want us to look at John now and then Luke last in a few days. It'll make sense when we do that, I hope. There's a longer story than Mark or Matthew and we're dealing with all of chapter John 20 and 21. So I'm not going to read the whole story. Perhaps you might like to do that afterwards. After visiting the tomb, Mary stands outside, crying, presumably because someone, they, have removed the body, have increased her grief by desecrating her grave. No wonder then that she does not recognize Jesus. Her vision is blurred by tears and her thinking by sadness. Twice Jesus speaks to her, but still she does not know him, until she calls her name. In the sadness, it takes that personal connection of being called by name to bring Mary out of her reverie and in the present, and to recognize Jesus' presence. We presume from Jesus' next words that Mary's first instinct is to make a move to touch him. If we didn't know before, we know now how deep-seated that instinct to hold somebody is. I'm not sure what would have been culturally automatic for Mary, but for us surely it would have been at least to reach out a hand and perhaps even move for some kind of a hug or embrace. And Jesus resists. Not in his case because of his following government guidelines about social distancing, but because he has not yet ascended to the Father. I often ponder these words, for surely if Jesus has not yet ascended, more of that next time, this is the very time to hold Jesus. Shortly after the scene, Thomas will be invited to place his hands into Jesus' wounds. Perhaps what Jesus is saying is that, like he told Peter and James and John on the Mount of Transfiguration, that Mary cannot hold or freeze the moment. Rather, she needs to take in the good news and play her part in sharing it. Then follows the account of Jesus appearing twice to the assembled disciples in a locked room, once without Thomas and once with him. Of course, we know that these accounts give rise to the phrase doubting Thomas, but always seems a bit unfair on Thomas. After all, in the end, he doesn't need the evidence he thought he would, and having only seen Jesus the once, and not been at the tomb, he has less to go on than some of the others, when he is able to say, "My Lord and my God." And then the book appears to finish with the words that this is written so that you may believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life in his name. It certainly sounds like an ending, doesn't it? Some of you will know the open secret that when one of the Marvel films comes to a close and the credits roll, it is in fact not time to get out of your seats at the cinema or to go and put the kettle on if you are at home, for there is likely to be one more scene that will perhaps tie up a loose end and give a slight hint about what might be to come next. So I wonder if the Marvel Cinematic Universe got the idea from John's Gospel. For here, after the apparent ending, we have a little vignette about Jesus and the disciples in Galilee, like Matthew's account, but this time by the lake and not on a mountain. There seem to be references to other stories in the Gospel and the others about fishing, miracle, and sharing food. It is perhaps a sort of symbolic summary of Jesus of Nazareth's time on earth with these friends, and also an anticipation of the beginning of the life of the church, acting in the name and in the power of the risen Christ. And then there is the dialogue with Peter, a story within a story, with its themes of reconciliation and commissioning. You and I have a connection with Jesus that is sadly often in need of repair from our part. And always when forgiveness comes from God, it is accompanied by a challenge to take our place in God's purposes for the world. Jesus says that sometimes we will be led where we do not want to go. To refer to the Methodist covenant service, sometimes following Jesus will suit our natural inclinations, and sometimes it will be contrary to them. And then Peter asked that curious question, what about him? But yet again he, like us, has the wrong end of the stick. For in this task that is being the church, we are called to be always working with our brothers and sisters, and not in competition with them.